about. That's why he's the MVP. That's why he's the GOAT. The GOAT.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another week of Muskies on Tap. I am your host, Gus Manti. We got a super special one, probably already seen by the title. We're having the very own Jeff Van Remortel of WDH Guide Service and Musky Academy founder on the podcast here tonight. We really enjoyed having him on. We talked a lot of good stuff about muskies, a lot of good stuff about our area here in the northeast section of Wisconsin. You know, we still got a lot of big fish here to be had. We have a lot of great fishing going on. I definitely agree with him that the direction of our lakes and the fishing has been very good overall. So before we go any further, let me introduce the others here on tonight. We got the very own Max Manti. How are you doing tonight, Max?
Doing really well tonight, Gus. Little under the weather again right now. I feel like that's been kind of the consistent battle I've been on here over the past few weeks, but really fired up after doing that interview with JVR. He's definitely somebody in the muskie world that when he speaks, we should listen. He's got a lot of knowledge. And I think this interview people will find informative and entertaining, hopefully. So, yeah, really enjoyed my time with him. I do know that you were fortunate enough to be graced with the presence of a Brian Eckel this weekend. Sounds like you guys met halfway and did a little bit of fishing.
A little bit of scouting new water and kind of giving it our best shot in the conditions that we had. I was fishing with Brian and his dad, and we were graced with freezing rain, basically. It wasn't like, at the cusp of 33, 34 degrees, but it was, cold enough. And our bodies aren't fully acclimated to that super, super cold temps yet. So we were kind of taking off the water early. And but yeah, let's also introduce the other Muskies on Tap member here tonight. We got our great pal, Brian.
Best pal.
Some could say best friend.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be here tonight. It wasn't an ideal Saturday. Out fishing with Gus, got absolutely tortured by the soon-to-be winter here in Wisconsin, 40 degrees and rain. Couldn't hardly grip the rod after 3 hours, so we got off the water. And then we're graced by a car needing a jump start at the launch. So that delayed us another 30 minutes or so of getting out of the freezing cold. Fun day and all. Still fun to be out on the water. But looking forward to this interview. Learned a ton just in a short, hour and a half here with JVR. He's got endless knowledge on all things musky. So hopefully we'll be able to get him back on for a part 2 down the road because I think he's got a lot to talk about still, and I think all of us, for listeners and us three in the pod, would love to hear more from him. So can't wait to get into that.
Yeah, 100%. I think he dropped a lot of knowledge even in that, and what someone could say is a short interview with him, because he talks and it's awesome because everything that comes out of his mouth is just like, I hope you're listening, like take notes. Before I just keep rambling about that, let's just dive right into the interview with JVR himself. All right, on the line, we have Jeff Van Remortel with WDH Guide Service and founder of Musky Academy. So without further ado, Jeff, you want to say hey to the folks and how you doing tonight?
Hey, good guys. Glad to be on. And been looking forward to it. Everything's good here.
Fantastic. So if you want to give a quick brief history or rundown on your guide service for those of the listeners that do not know who you are, which I would think there'd be almost zero, but maybe just a quick rundown on where you guide, maybe a quick background on how you got into guiding or, something like that, something brief.
Yeah, I mean, like most of us, started out fishing for muskies as a kid who caught one incidentally or saw them incidentally, thought that was cool, decided to buy bigger and better gear and continue the chase. That's, pretty similar story, I think, for probably most people in the muskie world, unless they had somebody that was a super avid fisherman and got him into it early. But I did not have that. My dad and I fished for him a bit growing up, but not anything like what we do now, more just occasionally between panfish and walleyes and pike and whatever else would bite. And then, I guide. I've been guiding since 2009. I've had my captain's license since 2010. I guide on the waters of Green Bay in the fall for ducks, as well as some musky trips out there in the summer, and then Great Lakes tributaries for steelhead in the spring, which is late March through the third week of April, give or take. And then I guide muskies, which is probably what I'm best known for, aside from the ducks, I guess. But muskies in the Vilas, Oneida, Iron, and Price County areas. And then back to ice fishing as well, and walleyes and multi-species, but mostly muskies during muskie season once our muskie opens up, and then I'll sneak in a couple walleye half days here and there with some of my long timers in particular who have been doing that with me for a long time.
All right. Well, awesome. So Jeff, the last few years I've gotten to know you a little bit better through this Muskie Academy thing. And so I think it's a really awesome thing that you're doing, and I was kind of hoping, to get a little bit of a lowdown this evening on, when did that light bulb idea flash on for you? And, when did it get started? How have you been enjoying kind of the progression of it? And where do you kind of foresee this going? Because I know I've personally enjoyed being a part of it. It's been, a cool ride.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And, watching guys like yourself and a ton of the other guys in the group, there's plenty of really good anglers in there. One of the things that kind of surprised me, I don't know if it surprised me as much, but when you first come up with the idea, just some of the caliber of anglers that we've attracted that have come to that group, I took that as a huge compliment. There's a lot of guys that are really good tournament fishermen. There's, I don't know, probably half dozen different guides in there. Some of them contribute and others, message privately. And in the group, we have the private group as well on top of all the videos in the core of the program, which is the, based on the website there, muskyacademy.com, musky with a Y, academy.com is where you can see a lineup of some of those videos. But yeah, the thought of it came, it's been about 3-4 years now. A customer of mine, his name is Blair. We had talked about it when we were fishing, and I had talked about it with another customer of mine, Josh, about writing a book. He's a published author, and he had a bestseller for a bass fishing book. He's got 2 really great books on Amazon there. I can't remember the title offhand, but anyway, his name is Josh Alwine. It was mostly focused on bass and stuff, and he fished with me for many, many years. Super good dude. But he's like, we had talked about doing one collaboratively, and then we just didn't get, neither of us had the time. He's a busy guy, I'm a busy guy, and we just kind of talked about it. It's like, if you ever need any help, let me know. And then it kind of it evolved, and it's like, the book just didn't seem like the way to go, because it's just something I can't go back and edit or add to.
Right.
And, anybody that's, certainly a generation, your age, you're a bit younger than me, but like certainly your age or even my age and younger, especially the folks that are digital native and going forward, the people that over the next 20 years will take up the reins of musky fishing or are just getting in now and will do it for the next 10, 15, 20 years. A lot of those folks are going to know how to use a Facebook page and click on a video link to watch it. So it seemed like more of an appropriate way to go this way. So anyway, Blair and I had been talking, and he's got some background in it from what he does professionally. And he's like, you ever think about, we were writing a book or something? And then the conversation kind of turned to like a master class type thing. And I was like, I've thought about it, and I would love to do something like that. And that was pre-pandemic. And then long and the short of it was we booked a trip. He booked a trip. It was the second or third time he fished with me during the pandemic, when everything was, shut down, and obviously things were on the digital side of things picking up. It was really kind of a forced push there. And he's like, hey man, he's like, did you ever, it was kind of, I had the question on my brain, he had it on his, and that's kind of how it all came about. He's like, did you give any more thought to what we talked about the last time? I was like, I was going to ask you the same thing. I was like, he's got 4 kids. I had 3 at the time. I got 2 with the third on the way at the time, and now I got 4. And he's got 4. When we have time to do this, we kind of, parsed out responsibilities for it and how we wanted to lay it out. And, I came up with like the rubric, the framework of how to break down, how I had it in my mind, how I wanted to put it into basically a syllabus, like a teachable program, for folks like yourselves or anybody listening to this podcast to learn, what I know about musky fishing and how to find them and what they do and what's going on in those lakes. throughout the course of a season. And then of course add in a lot of other stuff like, fishing a Cisco spawn, fishing a sucker spawn, fishing a mayfly hatch, or targeting tigers, or, any number of other things that you may not hear or see a lot of information about, in addition to all those seasonal movements. And then stuff on, there's a block on electronics coming in this year. Currently there's about 230 videos, I think it is, somewhere around the 23, 24-hour mark of watchable content in addition to the group. And then we'll add to that continuously annually as well. We've got about 30 or 40 more videos ready to go this year in the off season that'll be added as well. So I guess that's the long version of how it came to be, and watching the ride. Like you said, it's been a really cool deal. And this will be our second year. We went live 2 years ago, I guess would be the way to put it. And it's been great. The feedback's been tremendous, and the number of guys that have stayed on, and our retention rate's been high. A lot of the guys are sticking with the group and staying in there and getting a lot out of the program, which, man, it speaks for itself. You got guys like you guys winning tournaments, and certainly, it's not a way of taking credit for other people's success, in the way that you guys still have to go out there and put the pieces together. But, the way you and I have talked before, some of the tournaments, and other guys too, are just questions and stuff like that. It's basically, think about it like a consulting service on the side of just a learning kit, right? Yeah. I mean, it really kind of is what it is. In another way, right? I mean, in the fishing world, that's weird to hear it framed that way. But if this were any other type of business, that would be like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. That's very much a service that's offered throughout the corporate world, whether it be for, you name it, right? Or even, mechanic, doesn't matter, anything. There's all those major professions have stuff like that. So it kind of makes sense.
Right. And it almost doubles as like the Musky Consulting Academy. I mean, I think the two
really kind of what it is, right? I mean, in many ways.
Right. I mean, totally. The two, I think, biggest takeaways that I've gotten from it is through like the individual video lessons. It's the breaking down the seasons within the season. I think,
right.
Sometimes people get way too general with, okay, here's what you do in the spring, here's what you do in the summer, here's what you do in the fall. I think the videos that you put out are really good at like hyper analyzing. Okay, this is there's a few different seasons within this season. So that's been, I think, one huge, that has helped tremendously kind of like advance our progression of musky fishing. And then the second one that I think is really cool is like you were saying, the caliber of anglers, and really, I mean, anyone from starting to guys that have been doing it and guiding, like, you've said that there's some guides in there, all can benefit from just like having the community too aspect of it, shooting the shit. How'd your weekend go? Like we just hooked up with a bunch of buddies the other weekend, and had a big rendezvous, a big musky rendezvous. So I think, for me, those have been the two biggest awesome things that have kind of come out of it.
Yeah, that's really great to hear, man. And it's really cool. Like you touched on a bit of it too, is like some of the camaraderie there with the number of guys that are in that group that, I mean, some of it you see publicly with the postings that you see in the private group. But I message with a lot of the folks in there privately too, that just message, the Musky Academy account privately, just with a question or whatever. And they'll say, oh, I fished with so-and-so this past weekend or whatever. And how many of those guys have networked and helped out? And as you guys have seen in some of those posts, hey, I'm heading to the, such and such area this weekend. Anybody been out there or something? So sometimes you get that like on the ground feedback, or never know, you'll see somebody a PM sent or whatever too, and they'll, helping each other out. It's really cool. To see that kind of community build and that bond build with guys within the group. It's nice because there's none of the nonsense. Not that there's plenty of public places to comment and ask questions and stuff, but when you get into a system like this where it's behind a wall and you eliminated 100% of the nonsense and everybody in there's there for the right reasons.
100%.
Yeah, I agree with that. As the community member of that, it's amazing, that private Facebook group chat. And another thing I was going to add with the videos, Max was saying, like, hyper analyzing each individual season within the season, is that one thing I also like about those videos is that you kind of give a rundown on many different scenarios based on the time of year, whether that be lake choice. The biggest thing for me, it's like, pre-storm this time of year, cold front this time of year, a heat up this time of year, all that stuff on like what to do. And that's definitely helped a bunch. And the reassurance of, messaging you, it's like, hey, does this sound good? Like a good idea? And you're just like, yep, go for it. That just gives me the extra confidence on what I'm about to do.
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for, whenever you can talk to somebody that does anything literally 7 days a week. And especially when you start having done that for year after year after year and done it successfully. I don't care if you're a musky fisherman, a mechanic, whatever you are, whatever you do, if you do anything that much and you're halfway decent at what you do, you're going to have insight to something especially something as dynamic and changing as like the environment and the effects on a living creature that we can't really necessarily see what they're doing. You know, at least deer and other stuff are above the ground, right? You can put up trail cameras. You can kind of get a feel. Muskies are just down there, right? We see them on our electronics. You get them following tapes and stuff, but there's really a lot of that stuff that it goes to like what you just said was confidence. And I think giving people that confidence to know that what they're doing is the right thing. It's just that it doesn't work 24/7. You have to be there at the right time. And sometimes you just can't write on the spot if you weren't there at the right time. And then that seasonal progression also mixing in with, like you said, lake choice, because again, the answer, throw small bucktails in the spring. It's like, well, is that the same thing you want to do in a flowage versus a Cisco based lake with trout in it? You know, is that really the same thing? Am I really throwing in 3 feet of water on fence lake? Like, is that really my appropriate strategy? Is that really the best way? Or is that maybe more something that might work on a nice shallow portion of the Eagle River chain better, right? It's just one of those things where, like you said, it's too general. And I do like to incorporate some of the lessons I've learned from traveling and fishing other places too. I mean, you work that in there, and at the end of the day, muskies are muskies, but there's definitely differences between, the fish you find on the field or in Minnesota waters or Great Lakes waters or Kentucky or anywhere else. But at the same time, there's a lot of things that still correlate. So it's really cool to see it work across so many different areas.
Well, perfect. Well, let's get into some fish talk here. We want to know, kind of how the 2023 season went for you. I guess 2-part question. Anything interesting you took away from this year as a whole? Just that, from being like on the water as much as you said. Anything interesting from this year, and also, throw some highlights at us. We saw some pretty nice pictures come out of your boat from this year. So, feel free to touch on those as well.
Yeah, we had a tremendous year. It was a good year. I did boat. We put the most muskies I've ever had in the boat this year. We boated 156 muskies this year. My previous best was 154 from about, it was about 5 years ago. The average is right around 130 on average, and that's most of those are northern Wisconsin. This year I spent a little more time on Green Bay. We did exceptionally well out there as well. Caught a lot of nice fish and some really big ones out there too. So it was a nice mix up there. I mean, I'm from Green Bay. I've fished Green Bay since I was 3 years old. I've guided ducks out there for a long time, and so it's nice to be able to mix that up. And I've been guiding out there for muskies for the last several years, quite a few years actually now. And it's just nice to apply and see it come to fruition out there as well. But yeah, some of the highlights, we had some really nice tigers this year, a couple of mid 40 plus inch tigers. I did catch, I caught the 50 incher with my son. That was probably my highlight of the season. I mean, I did get a PB. I haven't posted a lot of those pictures yet, but I did get a really, really big one on the bay. That was my new PB, is a 55 by huge. It was
Holy shit.
Legit 50-pound class fish. Those pictures will make it up eventually when I have some time. The longest in my boat for the year was a 56 that was caught by a customer of mine, a young man named Mason. He got a super tanker with me. We landed 7 fish that day.
Oh my God.
We had, 3 over 50, and that was the 56 was the largest.
What added up for that weather day?
Yeah, right, exactly. His buddy who had never musky fished also got a 52, and
oh my God.
Cool. So and his previous personal best was a 38 that he caught with me. We tripled one day up north. He had caught, I think, 5 muskies in his career prior to that 56. So that was pretty incredible. I crushed him in the figure 8 on a bucktail, pandemonium.
Oh man.
Right at his toes, man. It's one of those things. He's like, "Oh, here's one." He looks down. I look down. I see the splash, and I just went for the net. But what I wouldn't give to have that vision burned into my memory of like actually seeing that fish, because he watched it. It was right at his toes. It came up and in the first turn just absolutely crushed him.
Oh,
yeah. So that was pretty special. That was pretty incredible fish and memory as well. And then, like I said, that 50 incher up north with my son, that was pretty cool. He just randomly. I had the day off with family, and it was kind of cloudy and muggy and moon. Everything was bright. It's perfect conditions. And he's like, "Daddy," he's like, "those are good fishing clouds." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, they are." Yeah. He's like, he's never once in his life told me he wanted to go musky fishing. He talks about muskies all the time, especially tiger muskies. He's all over that. But he just goes, "We should go musky fishing." I'm like, yeah, all right, let's go, man. All right, you want to go fishing? He's like, "I want to go." He's like, Daddy Oliver time, or whatever he said. Daddy, wait there. I was like, all right, I asked Gwen if she wanted to go. And she's like, no, she was busy helping Mom with some stuff. And they had a project going. So I was like, all right, I'm going to take them fishing. My wife's like, sounds good. Go ahead. And we went out. We kind of timed it, went out. I was planning to fish for, 1 or 2 hours around moon and hopefully catch a fish, right? Just catch a 36 or something. Just something to let him see it, I see a muskie, and I lost one about 15 minutes in. And he was just devastated. And I was like, they're moving, buddy. Don't just hold on. We'll go. He's eating a sandwich, time, and then I ended up sticking that one, and I felt it. It crushed a mag dog.
Oh,
And
Oh,
I
man.
crushed a mag dog way out on the cat, about 2 pumps into a cast, and it was. I'm like, oh, this is a good fish, and I got it close to the boat. I saw how long it was, and I'm like, oh man. And I walked it around the boat. I ended up going around the boat 3 times with it. My net was kind of hung up a little bit on my floor. I got like on the handles that go into the compartments, so like knobs. They're not the latches because of how the boat's designed, and it was just a little bit caught. Like, Oliver, can you get the net for Daddy? And he's like, yeah. He just kind of picked it up and handed me the net and netted it. And, oh man, he was losing his mind. It was just that's something I'll never forget. In fact, I'm going to have Rick Lax do a replica of that 50 so we can hang it at the house. So yeah, those are some of the
That's
highlights
awesome.
for sure this year. That was a good year.
Was that the first fish that Oliver saw firsthand?
That was the first muskie he's ever seen firsthand. Yeah.
oh my
That's
God.
special.
I know. And then when we let it go, he was mad that he goes, well, Daddy, that wasn't the big tiger muskie, he says. I'm like,
Oh my
Oh,
God.
man.
I couldn't help but laugh because we caught a giant one with one of my customers got a 52-inch tiger back in 2014, and I have a replica of that fish, and he does as well. And I've got to hang it at the house, so that's why he's so obsessed with the tiger muskie. I think because it's like right there, it's pretty prominent in our house there. So, but yeah, just a cool thing to see the fire lit and a young person like that, and kind of goes back to that whole teaching thing. Like you mentioned earlier, helping guys catch fish. I mean, when it's your own family, it's you're somebody that's close to you. It's super cool. I actually had my sister caught her first muskie this year too. The first time she ever muskie fished with a knot. She got 2. We went 2 for. She went like 2 for 4 or something like that. So she got. I didn't put those pictures up either. They've been kind of bad. I know I posted a lot of pictures, but there's a bunch that didn't make it up there. But they will. I'll get some up here as soon as I get my feet underneath me for duck season and start.
Well,
Get
yeah,
stuff-
I mean, you'd have to go like full-time social media guy if you're posting
Yeah, right.
150 some pictures of muskies.
Right? Yeah,
I
you can
mean,
only get so much up.
well, I'm sure that'll be a memory he's gonna have forever. I mean, is there? I
Oh,
guess
yeah.
is there anything you think you could attribute to the success this year? Whether just you, good, client, is there anything you could put your finger on why it's been good this year?
Well, yeah. So on the topic of like what's going on this year, so last year was a really good year for bucktails. I kind of had a memory pop up in my face, or maybe it was last year, the year before, especially was like just this year out of the first almost 70 fish in my boat, I think less than 5 were on bucktails. Now bucktails are always a great option, right? It just depends how you're fishing. This year it was definitely more of a rubber bite. And the rubber bite's always been one of my strongest suits for sure. I mean, I catch them on everything else, but if I can get away with having my customers rip rubber, I really, really prefer it because you can't really fish it wrong. You don't have to worry as much about boat side fish where we live, northern Wisconsin. We don't get a ton about, it's not Lake of the Woods. You watch YouTube, watch, your old musky fishing shows. Those fish behave a lot differently. Green Bay can be that way to a point. St. Clair a little bit, you get those fish that come in hot and eat at the boat. Northern Wisconsin, yes, we catch fish on figure eights. Yes, it's so important to do it, but it's not like up there where you'll have more figure eight action in a day on, say, Lake of the Woods on a good day than you'll have in a month on Northern Wisconsin, right? So a lot of that stuff where you can eliminate a little bit of that, where the fish eats it before the client has to actually execute and do a perfect figure eight to catch a fish, is nice. And that's one of the reasons like rubber, and I shouldn't say just rubber, jerk baits in general, SRJ, Suix. I threw a couple of different stuff this year. I did throw the Musky Mistress, the bait from Brian Whittala there, or Watala there. And that one, I did move some nice fish on that. We did not land anything on it. But I did like the action of that one too. It's kind of like about the shape and size, a little bit longer than like an SRJ. It's kind of a minnow bait, diverized platform, but it's got a lip on the front. And that's got a really nice action to it too. And we did well this year also on we didn't land any big ones. We lost one giant and caught a couple other ones. And I think it's also attributed again to something that was a little different that we did find useful was the mini grenade. That was a nice little tool. That was a nice little tool for some of those fish over the grass and suspended. I mean, I know Brad had talked about they were going to make a smaller one because he had the big one the year previous. And I knew immediately that was going to be, that was going to be a huge tool for me in certain applications, right? It's not like everything is like anything. There's, tool for different jobs. But that was one that helped produce a couple extra fish because the fish is out deep, I think it's important to remember. It's one of the things we talked about in some of those videos in the academy. But like one of the things that I think people forget is like, just because a fish is deep doesn't mean it wants to eat rubber. Just because a fish is shallow doesn't mean it wants to eat a bucktail. Okay. So if you can present those different types, which is why snapping rubber over the weeds can work really well. Now it's more of a common practice. A lot of guys do it, but 10, 12, 13 years ago when we started doing that. And there's a handful of other guys that were doing it for sure as well and winning tournaments, like Mark Lejeski's, other people that were kind of doing it beforehand because they were some of the first guys to get their hands on it, quite frankly, and really tune in that technique. And that's where we picked it up too, is fishing tournaments. A lot of the people from my generation fix it like, oh, okay, this is, you don't just throw them in deep water. You don't give it a slow pull like they do in Minnesota, right? Because all you heard about was throw rubber in the fall, right? That's when it's good. I still get people that I'm like, no, man, opening day, you're crushing fishing rubber if you're doing it right, or if the conditions are again. But remember that just because the fish is in a certain portion of the lake does not mean that it wants to eat, bait that might be the most conducive to throwing in that area. The same way that they don't always want to eat top water when you're throwing it over the weeds, right? A little better on a gloomy day versus a high, crisp, clear, cloudless day. It's the same thing for a switch between, say, a jerk bait and rubber, or rubber and blades. And when you have those little tools that have it just that extra bit dialed in, it can really help you out as an angler.
That's great. I kind of want to get into some more fall specific questions. I know you've been duck hunting a lot, but just kind of want to get into what you've noticed over the years with like big fish and small fish and their like effect from turnover. So are like the small fish tending to cling to those summer spots a little bit longer than the larger fish, or the larger fish a little bit more sensitive once that water temperature starts dropping? What have you noticed with that?
That's a good question. I think the answer, it's obviously a real big gray area. I think the biggest thing to focus on, just like any time of year, turnover is just another one of those periods that almost equate it to something like the spawn, in the way that it's a very distinct, very defined, very seasonal, very identifiable period that happens in these fish's life cycle on their annual, seasonal cycle, maybe life cycle, yes, but maybe the annual seasonal cycle. It's a very defining event. There's almost always a good window leading up to turnover, especially in the days, the 1 to 3 days before a lake actually flips. There's usually a really good window. Now that can depend on, of course, the weather and the conditions that go around it. If you have conditions that are leading up to it that are a bit more favorable, you've got, crisp, cold, below freezing or low 30, mid 30 degree nights with a nice hard frost, and then some sunny skies during the day, but a high in the, mid 40s or something. And that's what you've got, and it drops those water temperatures quickly, but relatively stable, sequentially, not herky jerky, not hot then warm. And you get that nice, it's dropping, and then into turnover. Then it finishes up its process and then it clears through. It's also similar in that respect to the spawn, in the way that the fish respond more positively in a year where the spawn happens, stable warming, the water temperature hits their time. They can get through that spawning cycle. Again, another major event in their annual cycle, and then they're done with it, and then they can get on to the next stage, right? It's the same thing with the turnover. The better and the more stable and the more quickly and smoothly and seamlessly that you get through the turnover, typically the better the windows tend to be. Now that's going to vary by lake type. Right now, for example, we get a warm up like this. This is where things start to get a little squirrely and put a wrench in the gears for a lot of people. And having those little observations, like, people who are on the water every day, and even the feedback in that group, just from guys that are in different areas, helps. And you get that insight into, oh, hey, I went to a bigger lake today, say it's Big Arborvitae, I don't know, for a nice popular area lake, right? 1,000 acres, max depth of mid 30 feet. And I went out there, didn't seem like it was done turning over yet. Went to Little Arborvitae, which is significantly smaller, and it was through turnover completely, and I caught fish. Stuff like that. But then if it's in that transitional state of in the process of turnover, and then you get, now it's going to be 65 degrees for a day or 3 or whatever, then things get paused, and it's still going to be tough fishing because it's still in limbo. And then in the lakes that are already through it they'll slow down gradually. If the water ever starts to rise in temperature significantly, typically it'll definitely be a hindrance to the bite. But again, the key is the nice smooth transition. And if you don't get that, then you really have to be careful. Again, the big thing on the other side of the turnover, once it completes, it's a great time for both a big window and a big fish. You asked about big fish versus smaller fish. I would say in both of those cases, a window is a window. You'll see bigger fish come on the feed at different times, typically correlating with, better weather, moon phase, perhaps. It might not even be just, full moon or new moon. It might be first quarter, last quarter, stuff of that nature. Like a good window is a good opportunity for a big fish, especially in the fall, because the windows are tight. I don't necessarily notice a huge correlation between like a good time to catch little fish versus big fish. Like when the fish are feeding, And that's, I guess, for size, you just want to be in a good spot with a big fish when the window opens up, because the fall, more so than any other time of year, those windows are acute. And if you're not on the water for that 45 minutes to 2 hours, or we're surrounding those windows, it's sometimes you might as well just stay home or go out for the next window. If you have, it'd be dead sea in between.
Right.
And more so that way than any other time of year.
Yeah, it seems like it's been, the last couple of weekends that I've fished been super tight windows, and the fish, we've had a big problem with a lot of fish liking the looks of our suckers but not eating them. It could be, kind of too close to turnover and the fish are a little loopy from all the water change, but do you have any secrets as to how to get these stubborn fish to actually commit to a sucker?
Well, and a lot of times it depends what kind of lake you're fishing. So like, what kind of lakes have you been fishing when you've been having that happen?
Flowages, like a chain.
Yeah, so like say Eagle River chain for the sake of argument, something like that. Okay, so that should be like post turnover. That should be a post turnover. I'd say right now all those lakes would be turned over. Has anybody been out there? Can anybody confirm that? I would say that they're turned over. Sure.
They're close. I was just out today. It's a little dirty yet on some of the larger ones, but the smaller ones are definitely done.
What did you have for a water temp?
About 49.
Yeah, then it should be done, I would say.
It might be done flipping, but
yeah, right. It still might need to stabilize or whatnot, but yeah, if you when you start to get to that sub 50 degree temperature range, especially if it's that way for a while, sometimes when the lake turns, it'll actually warm back up for a little bit. It'll get down to that 54, 52, 51. And then if it starts to flip, it all depends again where you're located, what kind of lake you're on, but as a general rule, it'll then it'll kind of flip. That water comes up because obviously the temperatures change. It gets colder up top than down below, and the density change. It has to flip, and it's more of a process. Obviously, it's not an immediate push the button and it happens. But sometimes that warmer water will come up. Like I've literally been on a lake and gone back the next day, and it was overnight, and it was like 2-3 degrees warmer than it was yesterday evening. It's like, well, it was 45 degrees last night. I don't know how the water warmed up 2 degrees, but it's just. And then you immediately know that you're on the wrong water, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm okay. Let's get out here. Yeah. So around the turnover, a lot of times when you're getting those fish that are following, a lot of it's just a window thing. And as things progress and get, there's usually a good sucker bite, leading right up to turnover. I'll often see, typically more fish will still come on casted baits, probably because you're just covering more water. Again, depends how you're presenting and what you're doing. When I'm speaking of sucker fishing in the way I'm describing it, when I say, this is how I'm sucker fishing, I'm getting fish. I'm always giving the preference to casting, just because of how I'm running my trips. I'm not talking about like late fall when it's a high of 28 degrees and you're sitting there with, several suckers out. You're just position fishing over cribs or deeper breaks and like that. I'm talking more, you're casting, you got 1, 2, 3 guys casting, and you got a sucker off the back of the boat trying to pick up those fish that follow, and or position fishing simultaneously and hitting cribs or connecting the dots on the way. So in that respect, some days they just like suckers more than others. Typically a cooling trend is a good time for that to trigger and be better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So you kind of opened up the door for a late fall question. So this one's a little bit selfish. So I apologize to anyone that this doesn't apply to, but it's been an enigma for me. It's something I want to get better at and learn more about. And it's chasing after that, like super tanker fat northern Wisconsin, late November, middle November musky on like a big clear system. It's something Gus and I started to tap into last few years, I should say. Some days failed completely. Other days have gone well. But from your kind of, what's your opinion on that? What's an effective way to fish like a deep, clear Cisco based lake in the late fall when you're chasing after that, 35, 40 pound fish?
Well, it's a great question. It really depends how the lake lays and what lake you're talking about. You have to consider when you're talking about those really big lakes, especially, and we're talking like our area, right? Like Vilas County area,
Mm-hmm. Right?
Those it does apply. You can apply the same techniques and the same knowledge to your Lake Genevas or Elkhart or anything deep and clear down in southern Wisconsin or anywhere else for that matter, in my opinion. But one of the things you want to key in on there is the foot movements in the fall. Probably the best time of year without question, I would say one of the best times of year to go after that true top ender is in those systems is the Cisco spawn. That can be anywhere from the very end of October to the first week or two in November, depending on what you've got for a cooling trend and water temps. Typically that low 40-degree range, 42 to 45-degree range is about when that gets going. That's the same that can, you could even translate that over to something like Green Bay when the whitefish show up to spawn and or Cisco's or anything else that they're eating out there. When you get that migration of fish, you'll get a push of fish that come up to do a certain thing to spawn, and you'll get a fish that do a certain thing to feed. And have those larger predator fish following them at all times. A good example of that in late fall. I'll kind of expand on it here, but like the late fall, your good example of that is going to be the Cisco spawn in lakes that don't have the Cisco's. A really, really good time to catch some of the biggest fish in the system is when the perch move shallow in September. So that's kind of like the same thing. Another migratory thing that's going on. You get a lot of these perch that come out of the mud. They slide up into the standing weeds. A lot of big fish that'll follow them in there that have been using the open mud flats. It's the same thing with the Cisco's. You get those fish that have been kind of roaming the basins and following them. So again, it makes them targetable. You find the spots where the Cisco's are spawning in, on, and around. The windows can be extremely tight, but that is probably the best time, hands down, to target the biggest fish in the system effectively.
And so when you're looking at the Cisco spawn, I mean, and when I'm talking about trying to fish it effectively, when Gus and I tried it, we were hanging suckers, we were jigging, we were casting. When we could. It was pretty cold when we've done it the last few times. The sucker fishing was really slow. Do you think you could attribute that to the fact that those fish are kind of like just gorging themselves on these Cisco's that are pushing up? And would it be more effective to kind of just cast your, until your hands fall off, and trying to, kind of figure out where these Cisco's are spawning and target those areas, like just kind of working, your typical mag dogs down the break, like say, they're coming up to spawn by like a big shallow rock reef or something. Are you just targeting that mag dogs, working it down the break, do it over and over and over until you finally get one to eat? Or do you think hanging suckers and everything is still an effective way to target those fish during a Cisco spawn?
Anytime that you're fishing a large top end fish, regardless of the time of year, but especially in the fall, the windows are going to be tight. So you can't get discouraged if you have 4, 5, 6 hours of nothing, because when it goes, you might get 3 of them in 45 minutes, and they might all be nice, or one might be big, and the others, when it goes, it goes. Another thing to consider there is, trolling is a super effective option. I'm not going to pretend like I'm the expert and have trolled, 100 hours, 200 hours of Cisco spawn lakes. It's not really, by that time of year, I'm getting done with it. I've got a little experience with it. I've fished it. I've casted it during that time of year, but it's not something that I've been able to do a ton of, because by the time it gets to, the middle of November, I'm duck hunting. So I am off the water at that time. However, one of the better ways to target them during that time frame, the live bait thing can work. I think part of it though, is when they are focused on those Cisco's, I do, and I've heard other people that do it a lot say the same thing. I think I've, talked with Jake Smith and other people that do focus on that time of year very heavily. And they've all said, the same thing as far as like the suckers, they lose a little bit of their effectiveness, certainly when they're surrounded by Cisco's. I think it's more of a match the hatch thing too. Those fish are keying in on those Cisco's. They really like to eat them. They're vulnerable. And one, they're getting full bellies. That's definitely a part of it. Two, they're also just not eating suckers, right? Like that's not really what they're there to get. It's not what they're keyed in on. It's not to say they won't eat one. If you don't have an option, certainly run that. One of the things I would recommend going and trying, if you're able to find them, Kurt's Island in particular, that I can think of. I can't think of anywhere else that's carried them. But if you can go and pick up some trout to run for bait, if you can run those, if you can run those instead of the suckers in that late season, that time of year, I think your effectiveness goes way up. If you have a way of netting some of those suckers while they're spawning, or some of those Cisco's while they're spawning, and rigging those as live bait as well, using some of the smaller quick strike rigs, you can achieve that. You might have to make your own depending on what size of Cisco's you're getting. But running Cisco's as live bait and doing that, if you're able to get live Cisco's, those fish are going to smash them. That's a much better way to do it than running the suckers. But there again comes the, you got to make sure that you're catching those Cisco's from that body of water that you're using them on. Make sure that you're not transporting them. So you do have to follow the rules, and you've got some additional hurdles there. But if you can get live Cisco's, that's going to work good. The shortcut to that, the hack, is if some of the bait shops carrying trout have it, run those instead. they're, that time of year, the water temps in the 40s. Those trout are pretty hardy in that water temperature. They won't last as long as a sucker, but they're still pretty solid, and they've got a much more similar shape and smell and stuff to those the Cisco's than the suckers do.
Man, I just got really excited to go fishing in November.
Also,
Yep, me too.
yeah. Also consider if you're a guy that throw a lot of black rubber or whatever else, don't be afraid to throw a lot more white, a lot more Cisco patterns that time of year. There's nothing wrong with throwing a black Medusa or whatever. That's still going to work fine, but don't be afraid. You will have a higher percentage. I feel like you'll have a higher success rate using, again, that match the hatch technique, at least on our fish in northern Wisconsin. You get over to places like Minnesota where fish like some of the gaudier colors. Sometimes they're using some really funky colors in some really clear water and getting smashed on it. That I do feel is a trait that leechers have more so than our fish in northern Wisconsin, but don't be afraid to shift over to more of that all white Cisco, your bulldogs, your swim baits. Swim baits are another great option for that time of year, by the way, as well. And again, trolling those breaks, especially on those days when it's miserable and cold, that as that water temperature sinks into that, that mid 40-degree range and that kind of that key temperature, you're going to get some really good feeding windows and really good opportunities of big fish, even if they are short and intense. But to prolong your time on the water, trolling is a really good way, to do that. And you're going to be able to watch your graph and cover some water and, hopefully see some fish on your side image or whatever else. And you would locate where those schools of Cisco's are. Cause a lot of it, for the most part, you're always learning, you're always learning new water. And that's a really great way to do it between windows and add to your knowledge base while simultaneously getting a chance at one of those big fish.
Gotcha. Well, speaking of big fish, something we do like to talk to about, especially guys that have, been around the block like yourself up in the Vilas and Oneida County area. I think people like hearing about it too, because I think sometimes we get a little bit, not I think annoyed is the wrong word, but I think we get labeled as, the area of the 36 incher, which I don't, obviously, yes, there's a lot of number lakes and there's a lot of, fish on the quote unquote smaller side from what we're consistently seeing on social media these days. But I feel like Vilas and Oneida County still, as you've said, consistently kick out big fish every year. So I'd be really curious to ask you, obviously you've caught the 52-inch tiger. I'd be curious to know if that was a fish you knew existed there and you were kind of targeting that one for a bit. And then 2, have you seen any other, behemoth size muskies up in that range, that maybe you haven't been able to get your hands on quite yet and have still kind of haunted you a little bit?
Yeah. There's been a couple of them over the years. Fish in particular, there's always those upper 40-inch fish, which are, that's kind of what you're targeting. It's very much an apples to apples thing. People going to a certain place, there's trade-offs, right? Northern Wisconsin, are you going to go up north and catch a 56 or 58-inch muskie? No, you're not. They're just not there. Okay. Maybe there's one, right? But Northern Wisconsin, a 57, 58, it's not what's there. Now, that being, our fish can put on substantial amounts of weight. There's been some very big fish caught. I think, the one in particular, like the Steve White, a client of Steve Herbeck's back in the day, it was on the cover of the Vilas County Plat book back in the 90s. They got one that was barely 50 inches and it was, I think, 47 pounds. I think it was like 50 1/4 inches and 47 pounds. There's been a number of those type of fish caught. That's probably the most well-known that I can say offhand of, from historically speaking, where it's just like ultra short. Also, of course, you had Tom Gelb getting those couple big fish. You're talking a 52 and change, 53. I think the one was 53 1/4, 53 1/2, which is a substantial fish. That's a huge fish. And no matter just by length, right? But then when you add in the fact that the girth was pushing 30 inches and it weighed, it was over 50 pounds. Good God.
Crazy.
Yeah, right. That's a giant fish. I know everybody's real familiar with those. But there's a couple of real big ones. There's one, I don't know if I want to say who caught it or not, because I don't want to make it sound like it's a, whatever. But anyway, long story short, there's a really big one caught. It was 52, I want to say 52 by 26 or so, about 3 or 4 years ago, caught up north. And I knew the guys that caught it, and I actually happened to have been duck hunting with them about the week and a half before they caught it. And I saw the fish, and I recognized the color pattern on the fish because that lake has a very distinct coloring on the fish. It's just not a lot of lakes where they look like that, especially now when they're that big. And I had seen this fish in particular. I had a customer raise it on number 7 Marvin in the spring, and we raised it in September again on a Dr. Evil. The one time it kind of boiled at the Dr. Evil, didn't get hooks. The other time it just came in, pretty feisty, but didn't eat on the Marvin in June. And I got a good look at it both times. Like, God, that's a big one. And it was kind of like, I know it was like 50, but I have a hard time up north saying that. Was it 49.75? Was it 50 and a half? It's hard up by us just because 50. But that one was when you look at it, you go, yeah, that's definitely up there.
Yeah.
And then the picture get posted in November. Is like, third week of November, I think they caught it. And I messaged them. I said, hey, congrats on the fish. And I was like, if you don't mind my asking, I asked if it was out of, such and such lake. And he's like, no, it was out of such lake. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. And like a couple hours later, he messaged like, dude, how'd you know that? He's like, I'm sorry, I can't look. He's like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, you caught it on the point off the north. Did you catch it on the point off the north shore? It was like a weed bar, a rock bar that comes out, or a weed bar that comes out, turns to rocks and ends on a sand tip. And I was like, that's where we saw it both times. He's like, yeah, dude, that's exactly where it was. So you get a fish like that. It was humongous. I don't remember what it probably was. Obviously a mid 40-pound plus fish. I don't think they weighed it, but just a truly tremendous fish. And those fish are definitely out there. I mean, I can tell stories of another 6, 8, 10 of them over the years that were around that people knew about. And that got caught. But yeah, the 50-inch fish, I would say, our northern Wisconsin fishing is about as good as it's probably ever been. I know there's a lot of people who would argue with that. Maybe let me rephrase that. Our lakes are in about as good a shape as they've ever been. Just because people aren't catching fish doesn't mean they're not there. Again, when you spend all day staring at a graph and stuff, there's a lot of this lake has no fish. And it's like, I don't know. I saw 14 on my graph today. I'm pretty sure they're here. And then it's just, even in a numbers lake, it just doesn't mean they're always going to eat. We don't have a lot of the stuff on the market anymore where it's like things are brand new that just absolutely catch fish. Like when Dr. Evils first came out, people have heard me talk about this before, and I think but it's a very, very valid point. When Bulldogs first came out, when Medusas first came out, when just those, double tens first came out, there's those true lure classes that just caught fish with impunity when fish had never seen them before. And they're still phenomenal baits, but that effect of just, you go out there, talk to the guy at the launch. Yeah, I threw my bucktail, caught nothing in 8 hours. You go out there ripping rubber, ripping pounders or big, the old China Medusas and go 4 for 8 in an hour and a half at moon. Like, it's like, yeah, okay, you didn't catch anything perfect. You're going to slay. You're going to, because that's how they're and those days are just kind of, they're not gone in the way that you can never do it again. But the consistency of just knowing you're going to go out and just mash like that because those fish had no idea is done because nobody stinks anymore. There's a lot of good stuff out there. There's a lot of good information out there. Electronics get better. The information and the everything just travels so fast. And I see this with everything, right? It's not just steelhead. It's not just muskies. It's steelhead. It's walleyes. Nobody sucks anymore. You know what I mean? Everybody's just good enough to be dangerous on the right day. So yeah, I guess there's that. But I do think our waters carry as nicer fish than they have historically. On average. I mean, there's certainly exceptions to that on an individual system basis. Yes, absolutely. But overall, our average catch rates up north are as good or better than they've ever been. Like the average length in my boat for northern Wisconsin muskies is right about 37 inches, which I think it was like 37.1 the last time I looked at it. I haven't done it for like the last year or two, but that's out of 1,400 plus muskies out of that area in the years previous to the last season or two. And I think that's pretty, it lines up with the DNR. I think their average length for their surveyed fish is like 36 and change as well. So, but I mean, to average that, it definitely was not that way historically, where people talk about back in the day, there was more. It's like, well, yeah, but the size limit was 28 and then it was 30. And they're stocking a lot of these lakes with an excess number of fish because harvest was such a big thing. So you didn't really have that true top end showing itself in the way that it might manifest now, even if more, quote unquote, big fish were caught back in the day. Most of them were still a lot of the same length as we're seeing today. It's just that they killed them and weighed them. So it's a little bit not apples to apples anymore for the way that we currently measure fish in our area. Not to say that there weren't 50 inches caught back then, there absolutely are. But this last year or 2 or 3, it seems like the last couple of years, you hear about more and more 50s caught and more 50s from like reputable sources too. There's always the guy that comes up and,
right.
Yeah, I got 50s. It's like, really? Because if I can get one a year, I'm pretty happy. I'm out every day.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a pretty legit distinction between what a legit 50 is and what a, hearsay 50 is.
Right. Because it's always a 50. 47 or bigger looks good in a picture of 50 all day. Like, okay.
Yeah.
And that's fine. If people want to say that, especially your average guy who catches 1, 5, 6 a year, and that's his biggest claim to fame. He caught a 48, wants to call it a 50. Whatever, dude. That's fine. But But on a true legitimate, like looking at the numbers, looking at like what I've seen in my boat, what I see for average sizes, what I see for average size from, tournament catches and all this other information that's out there and is reliable and solid, I think our fishery's in great shape. And I do still think northern Wisconsin is a great place to come catch a big fish. And the other thing we do have going for us too is we do have some tremendously big hybrids too. So that's not something that you get a lot of other places. Even, in Canada, there's some places that have them. Yeah, they get caught elsewhere? Yes, but northern Wisconsin, we are lucky to have that. And of course, we've got the variety of lakes that we have up there that really helps keep things fresh. So, there's still some real big ones up there, and it's a great place to be. I really wouldn't trade it for the world. I mean,
it's my favorite place to be. I know that sentiment's the same for all three of us. I mean, we try to, rep the area hard with this podcast. I mean, we love fishing up there, and it's good to hear that it's in good hands right now. And it sounds like the future's, going in the right direction. But you touched on it. I do want to pivot real quick because I'm sitting here staring at your frozen screen. You're holding a big ass trophy from a tournament. I kind of want to touch on because it's something that Gus and I have really got into. Brian and I dabbled with it a little bit, over the past years, and it's something we've loved to do. But tournament fishing, my question to you is, do you miss it? Because I know you went on a good little tear back in the day, and we've exchanged some good messages. I mean, what would you ever make a comeback? If you ever had the time in the future, I guess just kind of touch on some of your past history in tournament fishing.
Yeah, the biggest one for sure. We placed in quite a few tournaments and won one here and there, but the biggest one, the one in that frozen screen picture, that was the national championship Musky Open, or the Alliance tournament, as people call it. That was up in that's the one out of Eagle River, the one that's on. I think there's 52 lakes and there's 7 lake bodies. That was my biggest. That's because that's an individual tournament. You can catch, each individual angler registers their own fish. I know there's some boats maybe all registered under the same person, or there's a lot of talk of that over the years, and that's whatever. But we won it. I fished it with my good buddy Chris, and I won that. I had 6 fish. He had 2. I think we hooked 15 and we landed 8 total. And that 6 fish record still stands from 2012. That's the most that were ever caught in that tournament when I won it in 2012. And that's one that's always been a nice feather in the cap. I was the guest speaker at that tournament for a number of years there to give like the update on the current conditions and stuff like that for all the folks heading out. And it's a tremendously well-run event. And it's the largest musky tournament in the world. I think the year I fished it was right around 1,200 people, and it's kind of bounced back and forth between 1,100 and 1,300 people every year on an annual basis. So really a tremendous event. It's a really fun one to go fish if you're looking to kind of see how tournament fishing works out, learning to fish in a pressured situation. But the tournament fishing in general, the PMTT and, back in the day, the WMT, and then there was, a number of other tournaments. I do miss it. And I actually talked about it. I was actually considering fishing the PMTT this year, depending on what the schedule looks like. I do have a partner that we kind of had the agreement. If it ends up being on, 1 or 2 or 3 lakes that we feel like we'd like to go fish, that we'll do it. And I guess we'll see when that gets announced if we're gonna pull the trigger on that. But I don't know. Yeah, I do in the future at some point here. Obviously, I mean, I am a father of 4 kids. So traveling in musky tournaments, I mean, let's face it, it's great to win some money on the road, but unless you win, it's really hard to make a living. To consistently and always take first place for a financial gain is tough.
It's really
It's a tough thing to do. I don't care who you are. There's certainly some guys out there that have done really well, and that's awesome. Really speaks to their angling ability. You guys being included in that after your show this year of just being consistent and being good. But it's not like the bass or the walleye world where, hey, first place is $100,000 or something, or 80 grand. It's like, yeah, that can pay the bills for a little bit.
Right.
It's really just tough to go out and justify, especially as a guide with full books, and you get so many repeat customers that you kind of hate and running into it now, even where I've kind of got those weekends of what I feel like the dates will be for the PMTT. I've had a couple guys try to book them. I'm like, well, just wait. I'll make a note, and if I decide I'm not fishing, I'll message you. You'll be the first one, type thing. So, these guys become your friends too, and it's hard to kind of turn your back on that, but and leave to go do something else. But the long and the short of it, yeah, man, I miss it, and it's a great game to be on, especially if you're a young guy and looking to learn. The guys that are in that field, especially your Mark Lecheskis and Joey Rosansky and Mark Gillich and all the guys that fish, they go down, look at Madison PMTT this year, man. The good old boys from Wisconsin went down there and just lit it up. It just, there was no forward facing sonar. There was nothing there. They went down there and caught 2 of the biggest fish that were probably caught. on the entire chain this whole season, quite frankly, a 52 and change and a 53 or whatever they had. I mean,
Yes, it was
a
nuts.
tremendous fish, and they did it early in the year in a very tough bite when nobody else had it figured out. They went down there and they did work. You consistently put yourself up against guys like that, you're going to learn. And you're going to learn the hard way too. Like you can come in after you got your butt kicked and you go, man, I don't know. And then you go and you're like, dude got 3 today. Like, what do you mean? And it's just, it is an absolutely great way to sharpen the skills and hone your abilities as an angler. So yeah, I fully support the tournament world, and hopefully someday I'll get back and get a chance to do it. So we'll see.
There's no more humbling feeling than when you're struggling on a PMTT morning on the opening morning and you will open up Facebook and Tim's giving an update talking about how teams have already doubled and tripled, and you see a picture of some guy holding a 49 50-inch fish and you haven't even seen one yet. You're like, oh god.
So true, man. Yeah. And you know what, there's no better feeling than putting a 34-incher in the bag during the tournament. Like, that is a high. Even going all the way back, I still remember I actually went that one. I mean, it was a long time ago, whatever. But that one in 2012, we went in, and it's a 3-day tournament. You come in there, you got all that board. There's literally 500, 600, 700 people that are all there hanging out. They put up all the stuff, and it's like I'm in first place, but there's another dude with 4 fish, and he's fishing in a boat with 3 dudes, and nobody else has a fish. Like, so I'm fishing against 3 guys, good chance, And I need to get one more. Like, you get out that next morning, went back on a fish that I raised, and I think it nipped at the bait, if I remember right, the night before. Made like 20 casts on that spot, got one in the bag. I'm like, oh, here it is. But I need one more, and I stuck one more with like 20 minutes to go in the tournament. And it was like, get in the bag. You're like, that should be good. Hopefully it does it, and ended up the other guy didn't get any more. 4 fish was a set, but just that feeling, and they were like a 37 and a 39 and 3/4 or something like that incher. They weren't big fish, but you've never prayed for a 30 or a 34, whatever the cutoff for your tournament inch fish is, so hard. You're in a tournament and nothing feels better. There's very few feelings in the world as putting a good fish, especially a big fish or a fish could put you in the win in the bag during a tournament. And that's for sure a dragon that I would encourage everybody to chase. It's awesome. There's nothing better.
I could not agree more, because all I can say is that when we were on our 17 at the Chippewa Flowage, I don't think I've ever prayed so hard for a 31-inch muskie in my entire life.
Oh, dude, and listening to your podcast after that one, total trip down. I loved it. I listened to it. Oh, dude, it was great, because I knew you guys had talked with you and Gus when you're.
Yeah, I think
I was waiting for it, man. It was awesome.
I don't think probably the dumbest / funniest thing I think I've ever still done on the boat was after Gus boated that fish. I think I told this on the podcast, but there was like a group of like 3 guys, like probably in their 30s, walleye fishing, like real close to us. And, we start screaming like absolute idiots. And the guys on the boat next to us started screaming and they probably thought we had just caught like a 50-inch muskie because of how nuts we were going. And they like shout over to us. They're like, how big is it? And I'm like, 36 inches. And they just like didn't say anything, and we're probably like, man, they probably think we're absolute idiots. We got the cameras rolling, we got the PMTT sticker on, and we're going crazy over it. They probably have no clue, but I could not agree more how and I'm sure you get that a little bit with guiding, like if you're under the gun to put a client on fish. Gus has talked about that a little bit, and like you figure it out and you feel really good. And I mean, yeah, like when you put a fish in the net when you're up against some stakes, there's not too many better feelings than that.
No, and to your point there, that's honestly what keeps me going on. Like, that's what guiding keeps it fresh. Like, every day's a tournament, man. Mm-hmm. Like, you're not fishing for yourself, you're fishing for somebody else. It doesn't matter if you caught 7 yesterday. The guy in your boat today doesn't care about that. Like, you need to do it again today. Yeah, okay, yesterday was good. Today sucks. Weather's garbage. Doesn't matter if it's duck hunting, doesn't matter if it's doesn't matter if it's steelhead, doesn't matter if it's muskies, walleyes. Like, yeah, you did great yesterday. Now you got to do it again. And now you got to do it again. You got to do it again. And it's not about, maybe you won't get 7 like you did the day before, but if you get 1 and everybody else got not, it's all apples to apples. Like, who's the best, consistently being the best boat on the water, or the best, the best stick on a day after day after day basis is what I strive for. That's the thing. All right. Anybody can go out and have a good day, but if you can always have good days, or always have like an exceptional day based on the standards of that day. Like, you go out some days and you go, dude, if we can get 1 in the boat today, that's a win. 136 incher, especially if it's client ability, whether it's weather, what the fish are up to, combination of everything. If you can just go out and get that, make your goals for the day. Kind of, I always make that little hypothesis on the way out. Like, here's what I think is going to happen today. Is what I kind of say in my head. Like, well, this is when the window's been hot, or I'm kind of running through all that stuff on my way to a lake. I'm like, oh, this lake, I expect we'll maybe see like 4 fish. We'll hopefully get 1 bite. Probably get it around moon. If we don't get that, I'm going to leave. If we see more than that, or, you switch the spots, your just mind's going a mile in a minute, and you get it all lined up, and then you get out there, and then you kind of see where it goes. And it's all, like I said, every day every day is a tournament when you're doing that stuff. And as long as you can do good for the day's standards, that's great, but still nothing sweeter than a tournament fish.
Yeah, I agree.
No doubt. No doubt. Well, I know you got to get up at 3 a.m. here, so we don't want to keep you too much longer. Gus, Brian, do you guys have any other questions? We got JVR on the line right now, so if you got any,
yeah, how much longer do you want to give us? Do you have somewhere you're trying to run off to, other than to bed?
I got a few minutes. Go ahead, guys. Yeah, it's fine. I got
a few minutes. Okay, I just have a question, kind of going off the tournament chatter, but for people, this fall going to a new region of Wisconsin or going to a new lake in northern Wisconsin. And it doesn't have to be fall related, just any time of the year, I guess. What are your like biggest tips into people voyaging out into new water, and kind of like what they should look for, and how much time should they spend kind of mapping out the lake and things like that?
So yeah, venturing into new water, I think my response will probably sound like a lot of other people's. Do any, before you even make a decision to go to a lake, make sure it's a good lake. If there's any stocking records or any kind of literature you can look up, or lake maps, that kind of stuff. It's always nice to pregame, especially if you got a little time to do it when you're not on the water, whether it's a lunch break at work or you're just bored at home or doing something else, or, kind of make the most of your time off the water, so that when you get to the water, you're ready to go. I wouldn't say go as far as, putting in 20 waypoints in your graph and saying, this looks like a good spot. This looks like a good spot. I mean, you can, but you just don't want to get cluttered up either. But one of the biggest highs, next to your tournament fishing or putting a fish in the boat for a customer, one of my biggest highs is going to a lake that I've never been on, putting in a little scouting time, drive around for 2 hours or hour, whatever it is, and then try to fish through a period and put a fish in the bag. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, or did, especially, years ago, is like, well, how do you know all these lakes? Like, how do you, I've caught fish out of 121 lakes in Wisconsin, and muskies out of that. And I fished certainly more that I didn't see a fish or lost a fish, never boated one. And I add, 1 or 2 or maybe 3 to that a year at this point in my life. There's not many lakes in Vilas or Oneida County, and you could probably add Iron and a good chunk of Price and several in Forest, even down to Lincoln and Langley that I haven't really been on, but certainly Vilas and Oneida are my core. But there's not a lot of major lakes that you could say something I don't know quite a bit about. And there's probably, 85 to 90% chance that I've launched my boat on if it's any significant size and has a good muskie population. So you don't know if you don't go, is the one thing I'll say. And, that's what I would do every day. I would just go out. This is before I was guiding or before I had, full books and stuff, just like like Gus is doing right now. I talk to him, like every time I talk to Gus, he's like, oh, I'm going to go explore this lake or you're going to explore this. That's the right attitude. Whether you're going to be a guide or you're going to be just a really successful muskie angler, because you have to go learn the ins and outs of all these lakes, and you're going to put together those little milk runs and figure out, oh, this lake's good this time of year, or these conditions seem to lend itself better to this lake. And then you start putting together like those lake families where, okay, like by us, we got, say, your green lakes. So like, oh, okay, Carroll's a green lake, Pickerel's a green lake, Big Arborvitae is a green lake, Little Arborvitae is a green lake, Big St. Germain is is like that same thing, but just a bigger scale. And those kind of fall into a similar family, whereas you got like, oh, the Three Lakes chain is stained and the Eagle River chain is stained, and you got that, that's kind of its own deal. And those types of lakes will fire off a lot of times at the same time. And you got to put that all together, and you want to have a nice diversity to choose from. You want to have a clear Cisco Lake. You want to have a green lake. You want to have a brown lake. You want to have, the dark but clear, which it sounds like a weird thing if but if you're listen to the Muskie Academy, that makes more sense. But and the long and the short of it is all those lakes that fit those different profiles. You figure out kind of what these types of things are. You kind of get it all into a pool, and you get those families of like, A, B, C, and D categories, and then you match it up for the conditions of the day and try to go there. The only way you could ever hope to achieve that, which is why I don't mind sharing a lot of the stuff I share in there that I think is really good information, just even in these podcasts, is because there's no substitute for time on the water. Even if you do pick the right lake, you still have to know the ins and outs of it, and that's where that homework comes in. Going to that new water, making sure you learn the spots, dropping waypoints on, I still will waypoint out weed edges quite frequently, before there was any, way before forward facing sonar, certainly before side image even. What you do, I remember when GPS first came out, when I was fishing tournaments, and 2009, 2010, like the GPS was like, oh my God, you got GPS. That's a big thing. And now it's crazy to think that that's an innovation. Like there are dudes crushing tournaments, putting up numbers that will still win tournaments today by comparison. And they didn't even have a GPS on their boat yet. Like that's crazy to think about. Think about all the advancements in the last, 15 years in musky fishing, like the baits, the rods, the everything. And a lot of those guys were adept rubber rippers and stuff and throwing, big blades to a point. But a lot of it was a big rubber bite that did it. But those dudes were out doing it, and they did it on knowledge of the lake, and that's something that translates to now. And the only way to get it is to go out and gain it. So I guess my biggest tip is to really pay attention to what you're seeing on your graph, pay attention to what you're looking at, and make sure that you go at a time of year that's more conducive. I would say fall is probably the worst time to go explore a lake. Like right now is not the time I'm going to a lake I've never been to, unless I have it like, okay, this lake is all rock. Okay, this lake has Cisco. Or, something where I've got something else on my mind. Like, okay, I'm going to go try it down the Cisco spawn on a lake I haven't been to that I know has a big Cisco population. Okay. Well, the difference is because I can kind of target those areas where I feel like the Cisco's will spawn. I can easily find them with my electronics and dial in some of that. But, your best time to go and learn a lake is summer peak. That midsummer, that's the best time the weed lines are defined. Everything's there. You can find the weed areas. You can find the rock areas. You can really get out there and learn a lot in a very short amount of time and see what everything looks like when it's at peak. And that's going to give you a really good way to dial in the lake for really the rest of the year. So if you're going to explore, like I said, do it when you can. Obviously, everybody can't fish every day, but summer peak is easily the best time, in my opinion, to go out and learn a lake and see how it lays so that you can use it and, expound on that and manipulate and take advantage of that information later on in seasons to come.
I completely agree there. I think I want to say maybe in one or two of the last podcasts, I did say something like this is not a good time to explore brand new lakes.
So,
I'm actually, when I say I'm exploring now at this point, I'm kind of going back to the lakes that I went to like once this year and maybe twice.
right.
And even if I did or didn't have success, I'm going back to them just to see them at a different time of year. And I definitely agree with going at summer peak, seeing like the weed lines and stuff, because there were some places that I have been to only in the spring when the weeds weren't even up. And then I get there during summer peak and I'm like, oh my God, this place is completely different. And now there's finally muskies everywhere, something like that. But
Sure.
I'm sure you would agree with this, Jeff, but also going to a lake in like prior to musky season, say if you want a walleye or bass fish, check it out before the weeds are around and kind of see like what those shallow areas look like. I had some benefit to that this year going out to places in May.
Yeah, 100%, especially if you're going to be multi-species fishing. I think that's one of the other better things you can do, especially for yourself as a young guide, kind of learning these systems and really getting that under your belt, is going out there and learning how to catch the walleyes in some of your better lakes that are, even if they're your really good musky lakes and even if they're not, but learning to dial in those other species because it makes you fish areas that you might not have fished previously or you wouldn't normally fish otherwise. Because if you're only a musky guy, anecdotally, I would say that's the same thing that helped me on somewhere like Green Bay, where I've spent, 8,000 hours of sea service out there with a graph on. Like, just because I'm duck hunting doesn't mean I didn't look at other stuff. You know what I mean? You find things that, why would anybody go there if they weren't duck, you know what I mean? If they weren't looking, like, no musky fishing to go up there. It's like, oh, this looks like a good area. I'll try here, but you find things when you're constantly looking around, and that's a humongous system. And if you can do it out there, you can certainly do it on a 500 acre, 1,000 acre lake in northern Wisconsin. So being there for different reasons is something that makes you a better angler, and it's gonna translate into success.
Yeah, I need to get better at that for sure and get a little more multi-species under my belt, because that is something that I would say is my my weak side 100%, because as soon as musky opens, I kind of just switch gears and put everything else in the review mirror. But
yeah, and that's okay too, because going balls to the wall is good too. You got to learn sometime, and there's only so many hours in a day.
That's true. Well, I mean, I definitely hope one day to reach the success that you're at, Jeff, with the amount of lakes that you fish. Sounds like you fish a ton. I was really quick before we go, I had another question, but it's going to take way too long. One really quick.
No, go ahead. I got a few minutes if you do. That's okay.
So with all the lakes that you said that you've caught muskies in, I'm going to go with the short one first. This season, how many musky lakes do you think you fished throughout the course since opener?
Ooh, that's a great question. Well, if you add in stuff like chains,
Sure,
which I do,
yeah.
for the sake of argument there, I will say like the Eagle River chain, I will consider those like individual lakes because they're named as such. So I
Yeah.
guess if you're to count that as one, okay, I've caught fish out of, I think, every lake on that chain. Over the
Mhm.
course of my, I mean, Eagle River, I caught my first muskie. I caught it when I was 10 years old, the 29.5 incher off the point with the Indian by the Oman House.
I was just
Yep.
gonna say I heard you talk about it in a different podcast.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I heard that
hey,
too.
our parents are right down the road from that.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. So just kind of, I can include those as individual lakes, right? So for the sake of that, I would say, I don't know, 35 to 40, I would say that I probably went to, if you include stuff like that, where you're hitting 2, 3, 4 in a day. Yeah, certainly well, upwards of 30. Absolutely.
Perfect. So that sounds like you.
This year for sure, easily.
Yeah. So it sounds like you definitely probably dialed in, a few that you probably frequent, a few times a week.
Yes and no. It really depends what we're doing, but I mean, like I said, I have to lay it all out and see, because sometimes you can eliminate a group of lakes by figuring out that a certain type of lake isn't really going right now.
Mhm.
Like if I go to Lake A and I know that lakes B and C are very similar, and like the days that are good on B and C are typically good on A, and I go there and I've got high confidence, I know the fish are there, or I see them on my graph, or they follow in lazy, or whatever the case may be, I go out there, get my finger on the pulse. My next switch is not going to be to another lake in that same category like I talked about earlier, right? I'm not going to another, say I go to a green lake, I'm not going to another green lake, most likely.
Right.
Maybe the exception being like, I feel like the bite on this, I'll just use the Green Lake as an example because I'm using on this green bloomy lake was really good out here a couple days ago. Maybe that's still going on a green lake that's 3 times the size, because maybe the effect of, say, a fall cool down hasn't been felt there to the extent it was felt on the much smaller lake, where it can be a much more immediate impact because the water temperature drops faster. So you've got some caveats that way. But again, we have so many lakes to choose from that you have to be able to kind of make those quick connections and shortcuts, because you can't possibly fish them all at once. And when you're going to miss, sometimes it is just, hey, Lake A was going and Lake B and C weren't. You know what I mean? Even though they're very similar lakes, or by any combination thereof. But when you're able to put those together, the big thing is though that when you've done the homework previously, there's no way for you to know and group those lakes together if you haven't been there in the first place. So that's where we're really exploring. You got all the lakes in St. Germain and Boulder Junction, Eagle River, and Three Lakes, and you kind of got to figure out which ones all line up. And even if you don't go back, even if you go there and go, I just didn't like how it fished, I just didn't, it just wasn't for me. And I've gotten to the point now where I went back to several lakes this year that I haven't been to in years, and did very well. But it was all, I'm looking at the waypoints. I'm like, really, I haven't been here since 2017. Like, holy shit. And you went out there and, went 3 for 5. I guess they're still here. There's something to be said for rotating your pressure off a lake as a guide, especially because, you mentioned the targeting. There's definitely lakes that I frequent, no doubt. But there's definitely, you want to have more of those at your disposal as a guide, because otherwise you just burn out the fish. You don't want to go to the same lakes over and over and over, because there's only so many mouths there, and you will, no matter what you do, fall into your rut of fishing the way you fish, and you will, they habituate, right? So if you're only going there a couple times a year, the odds of those fish it's not to say nobody else went out there and threw a Medusa or something. Of course they did, or a tube or whatever. But they didn't do it on the spots you did it, how you did it, when you did it, time your time utilization, spot management. They didn't do that the same. And if you know those things and you know where they are and you're there at the right time, you can really take advantage. And then you've got more fresh fish. Because in northern Wisconsin, let's face it, our lakes are small. The populations aren't that high in a total number basis. It's not something like a Leech Lake, which is 110,000 acres. Like how many muskies are in Leech Lake? It's a lot, So if you got 30, 40, 50 muskies utilizing the same rock reef or the adjacent Cisco school or whatever, like that number in northern Wisconsin lakes like 4. Like there's like 4 on this area. If you fish that same spot every day, now there's obviously that's a stark example, but the big thing is there's only so many mouths and you're going to burn them up. So you really got to have a lot of different cards up your sleeve to get away from that pressure, because that is one of the biggest things that makes systems tough is additional pressure.
I completely agree. I struggled with that a little bit last year, and I tried to overcome that this year, where last year we had some, banger days in August. We could kind of pick them apart in September, and we kept hammering the absolute living shit out of those lakes. And by October 5th, all of our lakes just went flat dead, and we couldn't even get a fish to go out of it. And it's kind of like the same thing this year. I kind of went back to those lakes that I pressured, I'd say, pretty heavily myself. And I just couldn't find those bites again. And then I just had to branch out. And that's why I was looking for new water, is kind of finding almost not, what's hot that day or what's hot that week, but I was starting to find, places that are hot, consistently, where I can fall back. If I'm like truly not on a bite, all right, I'm going to go here. I'm going to fall back on this. And then if that's not working, then I'm going to go really back to my roots and go to the home water, the Eagle River chain.
That's a great strategy.
So,
Yeah, that's a great, but that's a great strategy. You branch out when you feel it's appropriate, and when you know it's going to be tough. That's not the day to explore. You got to go to where you know the fish are, where you know what they want to eat, and just try to get one to go. That's just all there is to it. Not every day is a great day to go to every lake. There's and the more you can, the more you can start on third base, the better off you are. You know what I mean? With your knowledge base, whether it be from, just from information you get elsewhere, from information you find in your own, whatever the case may be as an angler. But trying to start on that third base is the best way to do it for sure. And then when you can't, you just have to go and kind of go back to the drawing board, right? Is that kind of a fair?
Yeah,
kind of
no,
fair,
100%.
So you kind of go, well, that didn't work. I'm going to go back and where I got more confidence. That's absolutely.
Yeah,
I definitely. The big thing is don't get hung up on the same lakes.
Right.
As a lot of people
I
tend to
agree.
do. It's hard. It's hard not to, but you have to fight that.
No, I tried to fight that urge this summer. I discovered a new lake that I didn't really ever hear anything about. Went there the first day, saw a giant, caught a upper 30s, and then I'm like, okay, this is kind of cool. We're seeing some fish, and I proceeded to hit that lake. I want to say only that lake 6 days in a row. Boated fish every single day, saw fish every single time, and then after that, I'm like, all right, I just told myself, I'm like, I'm not going to come back here for a month. Like, I can't keep doing this like this. I mean, we're in northern Wisconsin. This lake is not giant. Like these, I'm running out of fish here, but I'm still seeing them. I'm like, I can't do it. I got to go somewhere else.
Yeah, and it's kind of like taking off the training wheels, right? You get in those comfort bites like that, especially it sounds like you found something where the fish might not be as educated, and dumb muskies are harder to come by every year. They learn, they know, they just get smarter, they get tougher to catch, the windows get tighter, and in your seasonal windows get tighter as well. Just the time frame of the bite after turnover, the bite before turnover, the bite at summer peak, the bite, all the stuff we talk about throughout the course of a year. The more educated the fish are, the harder they're to catch. Eagle River chain is a great example. I mean, there's more tournaments on that body of water than anything up north. There's more fishing pressure up there, probably, I would say. I mean, recreationally and tournament. You got some real in Musky League, two nights a week for Musky League at least.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Those fish know what's up, but yet at the same time, in the right conditions, I'll still drive all the way over to Eagle River chain and put 3 fish in the boat when I feel, or get chances at 2 or 3 fish. I don't mean every time, but I still have a high degree of confidence that I can go out there and catch fish, especially when the conditions are what I feel are favorable for it, despite those fish getting PhDs, every single one of them. So, it's just you just got to learn to adapt and overcome, and that's what makes a good musky fisherman anywhere, but especially those high pressure situations and high pressure waters. Your Pewaukees, your Eagle River chains, your whatever the Madison chain, whatever the case may be, it just makes you a better angler. And I'm really, I really do believe that if you can do it, if you can catch muskies or a lot of the other things here, quite frankly, if you can do well on walleyes or muskies or steelhead or ducks in Wisconsin, you can do it just about anywhere, because there's a lot of really talented anglers in our state, and there's a lot of guys that do it more so, I would say, per capita or on average than others. And you're always working for it. There's not a lot of givens here. You don't get too many, you know what I mean? There's not a lot of gimmies.
Yeah. No, not many handouts. Every once in a while you get, the
like until that next bait comes out, you know what I mean? If you could come out with something that worked as well as a double 10 the first time it was ever thrown on the lake, and what'll that next lure be? Who knows? Will there ever be another lure that really truly breaks it? I don't know. I don't know that there will be, just because of how fast things travel too.
It's gonna be a 12-tail Medusa,
right? And maybe right, yeah, exactly. Who knows? But the thing is like, that whole category already existed. You know, that
I
they
know.
already kind of know. You know,
100%.
the whole. I know you're joking, but it's just you rack your brain when you're out there and you're like, God, what'll get these things to go? And there's some other great, the beaver's a good one. That's a great bait. I've moved a lot of fish out in Wisconsin. I've had one since forever ago, but just and there's time and a place, but it's just I don't know what will the next category be. That's just one, or the grenade for that matter. I guess you got something that's completely different and has a great time and a place, allows you to present in a way that doesn't. But it's just nothing truly categorically new has come out, and I don't know if and when that will happen, but I wish it would.
Yeah, I'd be really curious. I mean, it'll be interesting to see kind of what bait manufacturers do over the next few years, because I couldn't agree more. It's like, what else is there that a muskie would
Where
want
do
to
we
eat?
go from here? Yeah, where do we go from here?
Like, we got 10-foot rods, we got these insanely high-powered reels now. I mean, you got baits ranging up to ridiculous size. I mean, it just feels like the spectrum is pretty well covered. So, but who knows? That's why things get invented all the time. New stuff
Yeah,
is
absolutely. And and it's kind of cool to see musky fishing become musky fishing again in a way, though.
Mhm.
In the way that it's the advantage. I mean, how many times you cast that fish, or you're there and you know that they're there, they just don't want to eat. I mean, they do, especially when they get pressure. They just not doing that today. Whereas if that fish had never seen a bait, you'd have caught it every 9 out of 10
Right.
times in decent
Right.
conditions. So
like you
that's
said.
why we like it. If it were easy, it wouldn't be any fun.
It's good job security for
Yeah.
you and Gus when it stays tough,
Yeah,
right?
right,
Yeah, I'll take tough conditions any day. I tell Max that every time in the tournament. I love tough conditions. Give me
I
that 1 to
agree
2
100%.
fish.
Yeah.
I don't want it where everybody with a bucktail's nailing 3 fish. I would rather have it be tough where you know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
I mean, for a tournament, with clients and stuff, I guess.
Oh,
you like
hell
that?
no. Yeah, no.
Then we'll take it. Yeah, you want one that suicides on a bait? Well, we want that.
Yeah, love that.
Absolutely.
Guy's never figure eight in his life and gets one the figure eight. That's the best.
Yeah, right. Oh gosh, yeah. The nice big dummy comes in and inhales it with a bunch of line out. Take that any day of the week. But in a tournament, I don't want that guy to catch a fish.
Right.
Oh, right.
No, 100%. All right. Well, we're gonna let you get to bed here. I know you got an early morning
Appreciate it.
too.
Yeah,
So
it was a good night, guys. Thank you.
yeah, we really appreciate you coming on. We were very much looking forward to this interview. Before you sign off though, do you want to just give a quick kind of rundown on how people can reach you for guiding for next year, and then 2, just kind of maybe a quick rundown on how to get signed up for the Muskie Academy if we got any new potential interested parties here after listening to this interview?
Yeah, for sure. Muskie Academy is super easy. You can go to muskieacademy.com. Click enroll now. It takes about 60 seconds and you're in. Basically, you get a prompt in the email. You just create your account, just the username and password. Takes not even 60 seconds. You'll be in. You can access all the videos immediately, 24/7. You can run it through the app there. You can download it offline. You can have all that stuff at your fingertips, in service, out of service, no matter what. You got that all right there. Super easy. If you have any questions on it, you can certainly find me or text me or message me on Facebook if you have any questions, either at the Muskie Academy account on Instagram or Facebook, or you can find me on any of my social media pages, Jeff Van Remortel or Jeff Van Remortel-WDH Guide Service on Facebook, or cell phone 920-639-6286. My website is Wisconsin Muskie with a Y, fishingguide.com. It is grossly out of date. I don't think I've updated it in like 7 or 8 years. I apologize for that. But my duck hunting website is current, if that makes anybody feel better. But the website is one thing. I should get that this winter here. But I'm pretty easy to find, and I'm always happy to answer any questions people have. So
Sweet.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you for your time tonight, Jeff. Good luck on the rest of the season duck hunting. And if we, don't get you back on the podcast here before, good luck in the ice season too. I know we'll definitely be in touch through, Muskies Academy and stuff like that. And definitely going to be looking to get you back on the podcast, maybe in the winter or something, or a time when you
Absolutely, man.
have a little more time on your hands,
Yeah, all good, man. I appreciate you guys putting up with me. I get talking about muskies. I always get so excited, and I got a lot to say about it. So I have a hard time sometimes turning it off. I appreciate you guys having me on, and I'd be happy to come back anytime. I'm sure we'll make that happen.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jeff.
Feel like we could have gone for hours tonight. So
Oh yeah, man. Now I'm all fired up about muskies, and I got to switch back to duck brain now.
All right. Well, take care. We'll talk soon.
Yes, take care, guys. Thanks again.
Take care. Thanks.
See ya. Thanks. All right. We can't thank JVR enough for coming on the podcast. That was an amazing interview. I hope everybody out there listening really enjoyed that one. We're for sure going to be reaching out to JVR this winter, or, sometime hopefully when he's got a little extra time on his hands, since he is a busy man, to get back on the podcast and maybe do a deeper dive into a specific topic. If any of the listeners out there know JVR or also fish this area of northern Wisconsin, have very specific topics they'd like to hear about, we'd be all ears if you want to message us on the Muskies on Tap Instagram, and we'll take some notes and kind of prep for the winter season. But how are you guys doing after that interview? I know I got graced with some pretty cool knowledge there.
Yeah, no, I'm riding high. Like I've been talking with you guys. I mean, JVR is a guy that we've listened to on a lot of other podcasts, and obviously, been in tune with a lot of the Muskie Academy stuff. So pretty cool to get the opportunity. Very nice of him to come on and chat with us guys this evening in his busy schedule. So yeah, really enjoyed it. Brian, what'd you learn from the interview tonight?
Yeah, I finally got some critical answers to what's really been eating me alive with these fish not eating suckers. JBR gave us a great depth of knowledge on that, and gave us a little pointer into maybe trying out some trout somehow if we can get our hands on them, or somehow netting / catching / getting our hands on these Cisco if you're going to be fishing bodies of water where there's an abundant Cisco population this fall. So yeah, excited to maybe try that one more time this year and see where it gets us.
Yeah, I agree there. I'm gonna hopefully get my hands on something like that to tackle the Cisco spawn time, because I know last year we had a little bit of a difficulty on getting them to eat suckers. So stay tuned on how we do there. This is just now the time of year. It's end of October. Temps are about to fall off a cliff here. We're getting a whole bunch of rain prior and during when this podcast drops up here in the Eagle River area. And then it's going to take a little dive off a cliff, and we're going to get lows in the 20s and highs in the 30s and potential snow this weekend. And it's going to scare some people, but I'm salivating at that, because this is I want to start. I've been like in between uninsulated and insulated bibs and winter rain gear and stuff like that, and I just want to go right into it. I know that's weird to say, like I want to wish time away, and never want to wish time away, but I'm excited for this, and this is really going to going back to that turnover talk, which I think JVR gave a good insight in there. And it's definitely something to do with staying flexible. But like the lakes that are in limbo, I've unfortunately been on quite a few of them during the limbo. And some I realized immediately and I got off, and thankfully I did. And others I didn't exactly figure it out. And just a lot of dumb fish that just were not eating. It was just more of not eating trolling, not eating suckers, not eating casting, not eating jigging. I was kind of bringing out the whole just repertoire
Gauntlet
that I can offer to these freaking fish. Throwing 6-inch baits, throwing 20-inch baits. I'm throwing everything I can at these things just to get some sort of strike out of them. And I think that post new moon, a lot of fish got their bellies filled and they became a little grumpy. I was able to boat a few when necessary. Tried a little bit more exploring ish. I know in the interview I kind of said something that I haven't exactly fully explored now. I'm more or less just going to the places that I explored to this summer that maybe I fished once, maybe twice, or maybe are just new to me this year, and I want to learn every seasonal pattern there. But this weather, the rain will kind of hold off on some of those big lakes fully turning over, but that cold snap is going to do it. We got some low wind this week during the rain, and then we're gonna get some ebb and flows of wind. It looks like the next week when it's really cold, it's gonna get really windy, and the feels like on Tuesday the 31st, the highest the feels like gets to is 21. The high that day is 31. The wind
That's my
is
favorite.
10 to 15 from the northwest. So
That's my favorite.
that's Brian's favorite. You already know that's my favorite, and probably Max's favorite too.
Not my favorite.
I don't know if I'll be how much I'll be dragging Dad out there on those days, but
Well, it sounds like you got a few guide trips booked here in November, but you still got a few days that are open if anyone wants to go crazy and get out there with you.
yeah, I got some nuts giving me some messages the past week asking for November dates, and they've been filling up some of the prime dates that are, year in, year out. Pretty much good for some bites and some big bites, and I'm really looking forward to those, and definitely still have a couple openings yet. And I think it's going to get real good. I think the sucker bite's going to be good on those lakes where they love suckers. I think the trolling bite is starting to pick up and starting to get some trolling hits and catches, and casting has been here and there. It's more or less just bringing them to the boat. And I just today got out some bondies and tubes and all that stuff to try a little jigging, and saw a few come up on live scope, take a look at it, and no bites, but I didn't give it much more than 40 or so minutes, maybe a half hour. So I'm looking forward to doing that more, and I can't wait for the feeling of that big old thump in the rod when you're just sitting there mindlessly going up and down, and all of a sudden it feels like the rod's getting taken out of your hand. So going to be looking forward to that, hoping to kind of add that in with some of the clients this fall. Maybe if they have or haven't done it, I think it's just something really unique and something that people got to learn. So yeah, I think that's what we got looking forward to coming up. Fish are on cribs, rocks. I think I've been saying that for the past few weeks. It's still kind of holding true. There were some fish in the weeds, but they're mainly holding off those breaks. A couple fish in mud flats with cribs, a couple fish on the break lines with cribs and rock, and steep and deep. That's the name of the game. Hold it true to your spot. Find the bait. Go back and forth. Don't be afraid to fish spots 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times in a row, or at least through the course of the day. If the bait's there, the muskies are there as well.
Yeah, good advice. We'll definitely have to dive in with maybe some more late fall fishing tactics here over the next, week or so on the podcast, guest dependent. But moving on to some more also additional pressing matters, 2 big things. First, we did get a lot of feedback on Brian's jean sleeping take from last weekend. Brian, with this new data that's now come out with about 100% of people saying that you're an absolute psycho for saying that, do you want to reposition your take at all, or are you going to plant your flag as the resident jean sleeper of the podcast?
Well, because they're listening to you, they're thinking that once we get off this pod, I'm going to hop into a pair of Wranglers and ball up in bed. That's not what I said. I said when you're maybe under the influence of a little bit of beers and you're sitting on the couch when you get home from the bar and you fall asleep, when you wake up, you feel good. And I think over the course of the week and some DMs, I might have convinced, shout out Poorly Made Memes, that, he might be on my side with this one.
There's no way.
What? What did he say to you? What on earth? There's no way.
I gotta have to pull it up again, but it looks like I need some leverage.
While he's doing that, can I just read one of my favorite DMs from the week that we got from Dwayne Wedler Jr.? He said, slept in jeans last night. What kind of psychopath thinks that's a good night's sleep?
No way.
So it sounded like Dwayne had a pretty good night. I was loving the few different people that were shooting in some DMs and pictures from having some beers out of their Muskies on tap glass. That was cool to see. Looked like everyone was drinking some good beers this weekend.
Yeah, it was cool to see, and like we're getting these orders, but it's even more like rewarding for us to see people posting them on their Instagram and showing that they're really enjoying them. So awesome stuff.
Yeah, appreciate all the orders in and still coming in. I'm getting them out as fast as possible. I'm about to get a whole bunch of packages, so as soon as they come in, I can get the hoodies and merch out the next day. But one thing I was just gonna quick add, I don't know if you touched on this DM, the one guy that said slept in jeans, then caught a 45 in Vermilion. Remember that one?
That's my guy right there.
So it does work.
Not only is it comfortable, but it brings you good luck. Everybody send us a DM of you sleeping in jeans this
No,
weekend.
No. Brian, one thing I don't know if I went over this at all, but that jean night, when you talked about that, which night was that? Was that before any of the times you whacked and stacked some fish, or how did that work out?
Pretty sure that was Friday night, in which case I did not catch one on Saturday.
Ooh.
I never said it was a good luck charm, but for that one DMer it was.
No, you just said it was the way to get the best night's sleep.
That was not any of my words either.
We got
All right,
words
moving on.
twisted. It's late. The boys are getting each other right now, and
we'll move on from it.
Next musky bender, I'll have a full denim fit.
There you go.
Canadian
Maybe
tux.
if anyone from Sims is listening to this, maybe make a full Canadian tuxedo, like rain suit.
Yep.
Not made out of actual denim, but just gives the
waterproof denim. Yeah.
Yep.
Nice.
I would love some waterproof denim.
I mean, I would definitely rock that. That would be a pretty sick fit.
That would be sweet.
Disgusting.
Or just go denim, waterproof, and then more denim. You know, if the top layer of denim gets wet, you
weigh
have the
400
waterproof
pounds by the end of the day.
That's all right. But then on the inside, you also get that great gravelly feel of jeans on your body.
Oh yeah,
that's just the best.
Lullaby.
Nothing better.
That's my favorite right there.
That's all our favorites. All right. Well, yeah. Once you guys get those sweatshirts, send some pictures in if you're still able to wear them out on the water. I don't know how many more days we'll be left with your last layer being our Muskies on Tap sweatshirt, but yeah, we'll make sure to repost those and get them out because it's always good to see some people repping the brand. It's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. And for those that don't know where you can find that, you can find that on my guide service page to order the merch, and that is www.sugsfishing.com, SUGS fishing. And you can also get in touch directly with me if you want to book a trip for late October, early to mid-November, chasing some giant muskies. Reach me at 920-264-3816. Would love to share the boat with you. Drop as many knowledge bombs as I can to yourself. And yeah, looking forward to it. Looking forward to hopefully putting some giants in the bag this fall. So all right, I think that does it for tonight's podcast. And if you guys don't have anything else to add here at the end, Brian, what do you got for the folks? They're dying to know.
All righty, everybody. Thank you for listening today. What an interview from JVR. Incredible stuff, an incredible fisherman, but maybe even a better dude. Can't wait to have him on again. So much more to untap there. Stay warm these coming weeks, guys. The season's closing quick, but there's still great time to catch that giant fall monster. And if you're going to be trying to catch any of these brown trout to use as bait, stay away from the fly fisherman. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.